Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. Last year, in fact almost 2 years ago, we looked at every Ferrari Formula 1 driver ever and listed them from worst to best. Now let's move on to another mega power of Formula 1, Williams. Given the changes at the team in the last few years, the death of Sir Frank Williams, and their slump from being a champagne-sipping dominant titan of the sport to general backmarking paupers, it seems like the right time to dive into the team's history and rate their drivers from worst to best, based solely on their time at Williams. And it is the Williams team that started in 1977, not the one before, nor the partnership with Walter Wolf. The Williams team that started in 1977 to the one that still exists in 2022. All 45 drivers to have raced for the team between then. Williams has had a lot less drivers than Ferrari, so this won't take as long. So let's take a look at every Williams Formula 1 driver ever, from worst to best. And this is part 1, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on part 2. Number 45, Paul di Resta. I always thought Paul di Resta deserved more of a chance in Formula 1 than he got. He had 3 decent years in the midfield with Force India between 2011 and 2013 before being dumped on his arse. He made a return as a reserve driver for Williams in 2016, but I bet even he thought he'd never be in another Formula 1 race ever again. Well, when Felipe Massa went sick in Hungary in 2017, Paul di Resta stepped up despite not taking part in any of the practice sessions. He finished last but won in qualifying, struggled to keep up with the pack and retired on lap 60 with an oil leak. Did not make an impression in his one Williams drive. Number 44, Jack Aitken. Not only did Jack Aitken only have one race for Williams, it was his only drive in Formula 1, stepping in for George Russell, who in turn was stepping in for Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes for the 2020 Sakhir Grand Prix. Nothing really stood out. Aitken qualified low down, finished 16th and had a couple of spins. It was about as good as a surprise drive in a Williams in 2020 could be, but otherwise very forgettable. Number 43, Mario Andretti. The 1978 Formula 1 World Champion was an absolute star for Lotus, and if this was a list of the best Lotus Formula 1 drivers ever, Andretti is a contender for top 5. But sadly for the American, this is a list of Williams' best drivers, and once again Andretti only had a single drive for the team, racing in Long Beach for Williams in 1982, which was to be the last appearance but 2 for the 14-year veteran of Formula 1. He qualified well and was making progress, but a mistake led to Andretti hitting the wall, and his time at Williams was done with very little to show for it. Number 42, Jean-Louis Schlesser. I've done a whole video on the Frenchman's one and only appearance in Formula 1, stepping in for Nigel Mansell. The star of sports car racing had a baptism of fire in Formula 1. He wasn't quick, but he did manage to drag his car to the end of the race, down in 11th place, but he did take out a leading Ayrton Senna along the way. The Italian Grand Prix of 1988 was the only race that year McLaren didn't win, and part of the reason for that was Schlesser, but he did in a way make a name for himself. Number 41, Ayrton Senna. How dare I? How dare I put motor racing royalty at the bottom end of a list of racing drivers? Surely Senna should top almost every list going in Formula 1. While Senna's time at Williams ended in tragedy, after just 3 races for the team, the other 2 races did not go to plan for the Brazilian. It made perfect sense for Senna to sign for Williams in 1994. The team had been dominant in 92 and 1993, and with Mansell and Prost gone, a seat for the best driver at the best team makes perfect sense. He qualified in pole for all 3 races, but a mistake at the Brazilian Grand Prix and being taken out at the Pacific Grand Prix, followed by his tragic death at Imola, meant Senna never had any kind of success for Williams. Despite this, an S sat on the nose cone of Williams all the way to 2021, so his legacy to the team, despite the not so great results, was clearly important, because it's Ayrton Senna. Number 40, Jonathan Palmer. It is weird putting Jonathan Palmer ahead of Ayrton Senna. The father of F1 flop Jolyon Palmer, this single drive for Williams was actually Palmer's Formula 1 debut, given to him as a thank you after spending the last 2 years as a test driver for the team. He put in a solid if unspectacular showing for the team, qualifying nearly last but managing to come home 13th. Unfortunately, the rest of his career was spent with the likes of Ram and Zach Speed and Tyrrell, and he wouldn't have much success in Formula 1. Much like his son, Jolyon Palmer. Number 39, Martin Brundle. I feel like this is a pairing that made a lot of sense. Martin Brundle just feels right in a Williams. His career would have gone very differently if he raced for the Williams team instead of Riccardo Patrese, but as it happened he made just one appearance for the team. After a few years struggling with the likes of Tyrrell and Zakspeed, Brundle decided to take a year out to race for the TWR Jaguar in the World Sports Car Series. He did get a job as a Williams reserve driver and stood in for Nigel Mansell at Spa in 1988. He qualified well in 12th and finished just outside the points in 7th, but it was not enough to secure a drive, and Martin Brundle had a pretty decent career with Brabham, Benetton, McLaren and Jordan amongst others, and is now a beloved Formula 1 commentator and an icon of the sport in his own way. Number 38, Alessandro Zanardi. The Italian has had a really hard life, but it has had its achievements. His time in Formula 1 is not great on paper. Poor results with bad teams such as Minardi, a dying Lotus team, and a few early appearances for Jordan. But his only full season came in 1999 with Williams. Williams were the team to beat for most of the 1990s, but by 1999 they had fallen from a great height, and Zanardi had an incredibly tough year with the team. He'd scored no points, filled mostly with retirements, but there were some okay performances just outside the points, and this was about the level of Williams in 1999. Zanardi has had a couple of really bad accidents in his life, but he is a kart champion and has won 4 gold and 2 silvers in the Paralympic Games. You cannot define the Italian by his short time at Williams in Formula 1. Number 37, Antonio Pizzonia. The Brazilian was never given a full season in Formula 1 and didn't get much chance to show what he could do. He is the first point scorer on this list, and he scored most of them in his 9 races for Williams. He replaced Marc Genet for 4 races in 2004 and put in some respectable performances to finish 7th 3 times. In 2005 he replaced a concussed Nick Heidfeld for the last 5 races of the year. He managed to finish 7th again on his first reappearance in Italy, but a series of crashes marked the end of his time at Williams, and he didn't do a lot in the aftermath, mostly racing in Brazil. Number 36, Patrick Neve. The first Williams driver, the original. The Belgian was almost a guinea pig for the team. Despite the team missing a few races as they got ready, Patrick Neve raced in most of the 1977 season. He didn't score any points and even failed to qualify a couple of times, but there were some good performances in the Ford-powered March chassis, and Patrick Neve did his best for the team. He would never race in Formula 1 ever again, and his career after was unremarkable. Being the 36th best Williams driver may be the highlight of his career. Number 35, Sergei Sirotkin. The Russian was always pretty average, but had at least been competitive in GP2 and was an experienced F1 test driver. So Williams picked him up for 2018 and he scored a single point all year and was completely outclassed by a young Lance Stroll. It's no surprise they replaced him after 1 season, but in his defence, this was the level Williams were at, and that 1 point means he at least took something away from his short Formula 1 career. He only had a handful of endurance races in the year since and has pretty much disappeared without a trace. Number 34, Robert Kubica. I was so happy the pole was back. Kubica was always billed as the champion but never was, because of his horrifying rally accident that cut his career short. But he came back in 2019 for a full season with Williams, and like Sergei Sirotkin, he only scored 1 point. But it was the only point Williams scored all year, so they should be grateful. It was just great to see him get a Formula 1 drive, but it was always doubtful he was going to be competitive, and he was uncompetitive all year. But Robert Kubica is a fan favourite and is still racing and winning. Number 33, Marc Genet. The Spaniard stepped in for the concussed Ralf Schumacher. Do we need to question why so many Williams drivers get concussions? Genet had a couple of years at Minardi behind him, but I don't think anyone would guess that in 2003, in his only race in Italy, Marc Genet would qualify 5th and finish 5th. That's a class drive for a one-off by a Minardi reject. He came back for a couple of races in 2004 and stepped in for Ralf Schumacher again, but couldn't get the results and was replaced by the Petrobras-backed Antonio Pizzonia. Number 32, Derek Daly. The father of IndyCar driver Conor Daly raced in Formula 1 in the late 70s and early 80s. He jumped around between Team Ensign and Tyrrell before landing a dream drive with the Williams team, who had been so successful over the last few years. 1982 was to be Derek Daly's final year in Formula 1 and his most successful, taking 8 points for a Williams team that was simultaneously chasing wins for eventual champion Keke Rosberg. Derek Daly had come in to replace Carlos Reutemann and couldn't match the Argentinian, but he scored points in his single season and was an otherwise unspectacular but steady driver for the team. Number 31, Kazuki Nakajima. I mean, the fact he ran over his own pit crew is almost enough to relegate Nakajima to last place. But in his 2 and a bit seasons for Williams, Kazuki Nakajima underperformed for the Williams team. Considering the huge amount of success at Le Mans and in Japanese racing he's had since, maybe this was just a blip or Formula 1 just didn't suit. Whatever the reason, Nakajima had a torrid time in Formula 1. 2008 was not a terrible year. Williams were just a midfield team and Nakajima scored occasional points over the season, a best 6th in Australia, 9 points scored and 15th overall in the standings. Not great, but 2009 was worse. He'd scored no points and was last of the full-time drivers in the standings. Kazuki Nakajima should have done a whole lot more in Formula 1. This was just part 1 of 3, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the action. Leave a comment with your thoughts. What would you have done differently? Who do you think will be number 1? Tell your friends and leave a like. Follow me on Twitter. I am planning on using it more in 2022. It's a good place to tell me what you think. Thank you for watching and have a good one.